I remember the exact moment the warmth of the ballroom hit my skin as I stepped inside a heavy, golden glow pouring from chandeliers so bright they made every polished surface gleam, like it belonged in a world that would never make room for someone like me. And yet I forced myself to walk in with steady breaths and a lifted chin, clutching the small envelope in my hand, even though my fingers trembled slightly from nerves and exhaustion. The engagement party was the kind of event people posted online to prove they lived perfect lives, with champagne towers that glittered under soft amber lights and guests who floated across the marble floors as if they had rehearsed every step. I had barely taken 3 steps when I spotted my sister standing on a raised platform near an arch overflowing with roses glowing in a silver dress that hugged her like it had been stitched out of worship. And every guest looked up at her with admiration that stung my chest because I knew none of it was real. I tried to steady myself, but the moment my father's eyes met mine across the room, the air shifted sharply. His face was already flushed, the way it always was after whiskey. But the instant he saw me, his expression darkened and tightened, the smile dropping from his lips as if my presence were a stain spreading across the perfect night he had crafted for his favorite child. I opened my mouth to say hello, maybe even to congratulate my sister, despite everything, but the words barely formed before he stormed forward with long, heavy steps, pushing past 2 guests who stared after him in confusion. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my posture straight until he reached me. His hand rose so fast I barely saw it. The slap exploded against my cheek with a sound so loud it cut through the music and froze the pianist's fingers above the keys. My head snapped to the side, heat spreading across my skin, and a metallic taste filled my mouth. I blinked, stunned, my breath catching in my chest as silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. The envelope slipped from my hand and drifted to the floor like a defeated surrender, but I did not even have time to look down at it because a second later, his fingers tangled violently into my hair. He grabbed at the roots, twisted, and yanked so hard my scalp burned instantly, sending a sharp jolt down my spine that forced a gasp from me as my knees wobbled. The guests stood frozen eyes wide, but no one moved as he dragged me forward across the marble, my heels scraping helplessly against the floor, while each pull sent another flash of pain across my scalp. Someone near the front reached out as if to help, but my mother rushed forward with that same smooth, practiced smile she used to hide our family's rot and placed a hand on the guest's arm before saying in a low voice that still carried through the room, "This is a family matter." The guest stiffened and stepped back clearly uncertain, but my mother's expression held firm, the kind of calm that came from decades of covering for a man she never dared contradict. My father kept dragging me, each step a punishment that echoed through the silent ballroom. My vision blurred slightly from the pain, and I felt my hair pulling painfully at the roots, my scalp throbbing with every jerk of his fist. I forced my hands against the floor to keep from collapsing completely, but he did not slow down. When I finally looked up, I saw my sister watching from the platform. Her expression was not horrified, not shocked, not confused. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, a cruel and familiar twist that told me she knew exactly why this was happening and that she enjoyed every second of it. That smile pierced me deeper than the pain in my scalp. Behind the crowd, a young server had frozen mid-step, eyes wide with disbelief. And after 2 long seconds of hesitation, he slowly reached into his apron and pulled out his phone. For a brief moment, our eyes met. He looked uncertain, then determined, then he pressed record. Something cold and sharp settled inside my chest at that moment. Not relief, not hope, but a strange, focused clarity that cut through the pain, like a thin blade saying, "Finally, someone sees this." My father yanked hard again, and my balance gave out completely. My knees hit the marble first, sending a sting up my legs, then my palms slammed against the floor as I tried to catch myself. He did not release my hair. He bent down just enough to spit words at me, calling me an embarrassment, saying I should have stayed home, saying I did not belong here and never had. His breath smelled of whiskey, heavy and sharp, and tears stung the corners of my eyes, not from sadness but from humiliation so raw it scraped at my throat. But underneath that humiliation, something shifted. Something long buried pushed to the surface. I felt my palms press into the cold marble, grounding me, steadying me. And as his voice raged above me and every pair of eyes in the room watched my humiliation unfold like a sick performance, a quiet, fierce certainty began to rise inside me, settling into my bones with a final steady exhale. Tonight, I stop being their scapegoat. The moment my father released his grip and stalked back toward the center of the ballroom as if nothing had happened, I pushed myself up slowly, my scalp still throbbing where his fingers had wrenched my hair, and for a brief second I simply stood there absorbing the scene I had walked into, the scene I had never been meant to belong to. The engagement party was a masterpiece crafted for my sister. A world drenched in luxury and admiration, designed so meticulously it looked like a magazine spread brought to life. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like inverted crowns made of shattered stars, each one dripping with light that spilled across the marble floors in soft ribbons of gold. The entire room was washed in warm tones, from the pale blush floral arrangements climbing the walls to the soft amber glow that wrapped itself around every guest, making them seem untouched by anything imperfect or real. A pianist sat near the corner, his hands gliding over the keys in fluid motions that filled the air with a gentle classical melody, the kind chosen to impress visitors with elegance rather than emotion. A champagne tower stood near the center, each flute reflecting glimmers of light, like 100 tiny mirrors capturing pieces of a life I could never claim. Everything was perfect, too perfect, and that perfection had cost me more than anyone here would ever know. I looked toward the stage where my sister stood perfectly poised beneath an arch made of white and pale gold roses. The petals illuminated with such soft lighting they glowed like they had been painted just moments before. She radiated the same polished confidence she had worn since childhood, the kind that came not from effort, but from being told your entire life that you were special, chosen, superior. The guests adored her. Women leaned close to one another, whispering about how stunning she looked. Men approached her parents, shaking hands and offering congratulations. Everything about the night revolved around her, the star of a story I had never been allowed to join. This engagement was not just a celebration. It was a declaration of hierarchy. It was the world confirming that she was the golden child, and I was the afterthought. I had not been invited out of love or obligation. I had been invited out of decorum, the bare minimum acknowledgement required, so my parents could pretend they were still a proper family. I felt it the moment I entered and watched heads subtly turn away, avoiding eye contact, as if my presence might somehow tarnish the photographs or stain the carefully constructed fantasy of our perfect life. They all adored my sister, but more than that, they adored the image my parents crafted of our family. My existence threatened that image. My existence reminded them of the cracks beneath the gold. My father's slap had not shocked the room because it happened. It had shocked the room because it had happened where people could see it. I slowly moved along the edge of the ballroom, feeling every stare slide over me like ice water. Some guests whispered softly to each other, mouths hidden behind champagne glasses, their expressions tight with discomfort, but not courage. Their silence told me everything. They knew something was wrong, but they would never speak it. Speaking it meant acknowledging the truth behind the glitter. And no one here wanted that. A woman in a navy gown brushed past me, her perfume trailing behind her like a cloud, and as she moved by, she whispered barely above a breath, "I am so sorry," before stepping away quickly, her eyes darting nervously toward my mother, as if she feared being caught offering even a sliver of kindness to someone like me. I glanced toward the far side of the room, where my mother stood near a group of guests, her posture perfect, her smile carefully arranged as if nothing had happened. She gestured gracefully toward the floral arch while speaking to a woman in a sequined dress, and though she glanced my way for only half a second, I saw it. The warning, the silent command that had followed me throughout my entire life. Behave. Do not embarrass us. Do not make this about you. Her expression shifted back to warmth instantly, the same warmth that had fooled friends, neighbors, church groups, co-workers, anyone who met her. She was a master of the illusion, the perfect mother with the perfect family. I had never been part of that image. I had always been the smudge she pretended not to see. I took a slow breath as the room buzzed around me again, conversations resuming with polite smiles and controlled excitement. The pianist slid back into the melody he had abandoned a moment before. Servers in black vests carried trays of hors d'oeuvres weaving between guests with practiced grace. Everything looked normal again, like nothing had happened at all, as if the moment of violence had simply dissolved into the air and been swallowed by the lights and music. But I felt it. The sting on my cheek, the pull on my scalp, the weight of the humiliation pressing against my ribs, the ache in my throat from words I had swallowed for years. This was not new. This was not surprising. This was simply the most public version of what had always lived behind the walls of my family's home. I had known I was not welcome long before I stepped through those doors. The invitation itself had been a formality sent only to keep up appearances. It was clear in the short, cold message my mother sent. "We expect you to attend. It is important for family presentation. Family presentation. Not love, not inclusion, not belonging." And as I looked around the ballroom filled with people who adored my sister, who worshipped the surface of our family, without knowing the rot underneath, I felt something heavy settle deeper into my chest. I did not belong here. I never had. And the strangest part was that for the first time in my life, I no longer ached for that belonging. I only ached for freedom. I did not plan to uncover the truth. It found me slowly and painfully the way rot reveals itself only after the surface finally cracks. It started with a single email notification, quiet Tuesday morning. Nothing unusual at first glance, just an alert about a successful purchase from a jewelry store I had never stepped foot in. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, maybe fraud from some stranger halfway across the country. But when I opened my banking app to check the transaction, my breath snagged in my throat. My balance was thousands of dollars lower. Not by accident, not by a clerical error. It was gone. A $40,000 transfer had been made over the course of several weeks. Small withdrawals mixed with larger ones, all routed through a secondary card I never authorized. My chest tightened. I combed through every statement again and again, my pulse growing louder in my ears. That was my money earned through years of double shifts, long nights, and sacrifices no one in my family ever noticed or cared to understand. I froze as I scrolled, nausea climbing up my throat. Someone had not only stolen from me, but done so confidently, repeatedly, without fear of being caught. Someone who clearly knew my patterns, my schedule, my financial habits. Someone close. Too close. My fingers shook as I clicked into the card details, bracing myself for the name that appeared though I should have known. The cardholder name was my own, but the authorized user tied to it was hers. My sister. For a moment, the room tilted around me as if the floor had fallen away. I stared at the screen, waiting for the name to change, waiting for it to make sense. But it did not. She had used my name to open a supplementary card. She had signed my authorization digitally. She had stolen my bank login and siphoned $40,000 without hesitation, without guilt, without a single thought about what that money meant to me or what losing it would do to my life. I felt a cold wave crawl over my skin as the truth settled heavy and suffocating in my chest. My sister had stolen from me, and not pocket change or an impulse purchase. She had drained me deliberately, slowly, methodically. I dug deeper, clicking into each transaction. There it was. The engagement ring. $30,000 in one purchase from a luxury jeweler identical to the email I had received that morning. Then, a $7,000 charge from a boutique bridal store for fittings, hair cosmetics, and a designer dress. A $2,000 spa package. Smaller charges sprinkled between them for gas restaurant salon visits and gifts, all building a picture of a life she had built using money she never earned. A life she had purchased using mine. I felt heat rise in my face as disbelief twisted into something sharper, something that burned more than it hurt. How long had she planned this? How many times had she smiled at me knowing she was stealing from me behind that smile? I remembered the way she laughed weeks earlier when she showed off her engagement ring, telling everyone how her fiancé insisted on getting her the best, how he spared no expense, how she basked in admiration while I stood in the corner watching people praise her. My stomach churned. She had used my money to build her fantasy, all while letting people believe she had earned it through charm and love. I wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, some wild explanation that would make any of this make sense, but deep down I knew better. My sister had always taken what she wanted. From praise to possessions to affection, she consumed everything around her without thought. What she could not get through charm, she took through manipulation, and now she had taken from me. I gathered every document, every screenshot, every statement, organizing them methodically, even as my heart pounded in uneven beats. I printed the pages one by one, the printer humming steadily as if unaffected by the storm raging inside me. When the stack was complete, I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the evidence in my hands. I did not want to confront her alone. I knew how she would turn it against me. She always had. So I went to my parents first. I sat down at the kitchen island, the papers neatly stacked, and waited for them to join me. My mother stepped into the room first, her hair perfectly arranged, her expression neutral in that way she used whenever she sensed unpleasantness brewing. My father followed moments later, glancing at me with impatience, as if he had somewhere more important to be. I laid the papers out in front of them without speaking, unable to mask the tremble in my fingers. My mother skimmed the first page, and her brows lifted slightly, but not in shock, more in annoyance. My father barely looked before pushing the stack away with a scoff. "Why would she steal from you?" His voice was sharp, irritated, as if my accusation alone had offended him personally. I stared at him stunned, my voice slipping out barely above a whisper. "Because the charges are under her name. The card is under her login. She used my account." He waved his hand dismissively. "Stop being dramatic. You always look for problems. Your sister is planning a wedding. She has enough stress without you accusing her of crimes." Crimes. The word sat heavy in my throat. Because that is what it was. Identity theft. Fraud. Tens of thousands of dollars evaporated from my account while she strutted around showing off a ring she claimed her fiancé had bought her. My mother stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on my arm, her voice soft and sweet in a way that felt more like manipulation than comfort. "Your sister has always struggled with money. Maybe she needed help. Maybe this is something we can fix quietly." Quietly. Quietly. Always quietly, as if silence could smooth over betrayal, as if I should be grateful to be used. I pulled my arm away slowly, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The emotional blow hit me harder than the financial one. Hi, Vong. Maybe they would listen. That Vong. Of course they did not. Dow. Hearing them defend her theft as if I owed her everything. Tuck. Feeling something inside me swell with a force I had never allowed myself to feel. This was not about money. This was about my place in this family, about the role I had been forced into my whole life. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and in that moment, I finally understood. They never believed me because they never saw me, and they never would. Looking at my father's face that day, at the disbelief that bordered on disgust when I suggested my sister had stolen from me, unlocked memories I had spent years pushing into the quiet corners of my mind. Memories I believed I had outgrown, but that had only softened enough to hide behind adult responsibilities and the illusion of distance. They rose now like ghosts, uninvited and unforgiving, reminding me of the truth I had always known but never wanted to accept. My childhood had been a stage where the roles were assigned early and never renegotiated. My sister was the golden child from the moment she took her first breath, the daughter my parents doted on, as if her existence alone justified their own. She was praised for everything she did, from taking her first steps to winning school awards, and even when she stumbled, their hands reached for her before the ground ever could. She was light poured into human shape. I was something else entirely. I grew up in the same house, but never felt like I belonged in it. I was the quieter child, the one who clung to books and soft spaces, the one who asked too many questions and felt too much. My mother used to say I was too sensitive, her tone carrying something closer to annoyance than concern, and my father said I needed to toughen up, that the world would eat me alive if I did not learn to act like I deserved to breathe. My sister did not have to learn anything. She was simply adored. I remember one afternoon when I was 8 carrying a glass of lemonade to the living room because I wanted to show my mother I could help. The condensation made the glass slippery, and it shifted in my hands just enough that it fell and shattered across the hardwood floor. I stood frozen, frightened, expecting help, or at least calm guidance. Instead, my father stormed into the room, grabbed my wrist, and slapped me so hard my ears rang for minutes afterward. My mother appeared seconds later, not to comfort me, but to scold me for upsetting him. My sister peeked from behind them, her eyes wide, but not with worry. She looked almost curious, like she was watching a show she had already seen before. My mother later called it discipline. My father called it teaching me responsibility. But the lesson I learned was different from the one they thought they were giving me. I learned that in our home, mistakes were allowed only if my sister made them. I learned that love was conditional and always out of my reach. I learned that survival meant staying quiet. As the years passed, those early patterns deepened into grooves that carved themselves into our daily life. When my sister broke a vase playing with her friends, my parents blamed the maid. When she lied about skipping class, they talked about stress and pressure and how she needed more support. When she crashed my father's car in high school, he held her while she cried and said he was just glad she was safe. When I forgot to take out the trash, he slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. When I cried after he yelled at me, my mother told me I was being dramatic. She said I needed to learn not to provoke him. I was the ghost child, visible only when I was in the way, preserved only as a cautionary tale. Do not be like her. Be like your sister. My sister understood this dynamic early and wielded it like a weapon. She learned that every tear she shed earned her comfort, while every tear I shed earned me punishment. She learned that blaming me for anything big or small guaranteed she would be believed. She learned that I would always be forced to apologize even when she was the one who hurt me. She got away with everything, not because she was clever, but because she was loved. I remember a summer afternoon when we were teenagers sitting on the porch while my mother arranged flowers inside. My sister accidentally knocked over a pot of soil, the dirt spilling across the freshly cleaned deck. She gasped loudly and immediately called out my name, her eyes wide and innocent. When my parents came outside, she pointed at me with trembling fingers. She did it. She is always ruining things. My father looked at the dirt, then at me, and something in his face hardened instantly. He grabbed my arm and pulled me inside with a force that made me stumble. He did not ask questions. He did not look at my sister twice. And even when I tried to defend myself to explain the truth, my mother's disappointment was already fixed in her expression as she lectured me about lying. I wanted so badly to believe I could win them over one day that if I worked harder or behaved better or spoke softer, I could shift something in their hearts. But it never shifted. The roles were permanent. The golden child who could do no wrong. The ghost child who absorbed every wrong. There were softer memories too, but even they were tainted. I remembered sitting alone at the dinner table doing homework while my parents helped my sister prepare for a school talent show, praising her, singing her confidence, her stage presence, all while ignoring the artwork I had won local contests for. I remembered being sick with the flu and lying on the couch shivering while my sister, healthy and energetic, complained loudly until my mother gave her my blanket. I remembered birthdays where my sister received gifts that sparkled while mine were practical, impersonal, sometimes forgotten entirely. I remembered the divide widening as we grew older, as my sister blossomed into the center of every room, and I learned to fade into the walls. And now, standing in my parents' kitchen with evidence of her theft laid out in front of them, I realized nothing had changed. They still believed her without question. They still doubted me without hesitation. They still protected her even when her wrongdoing was undeniable. They would rather call me dramatic than admit she had committed a crime. They would rather lose their daughter in silence than confront the truth about the one they adored. My father's dismissive snarl echoed in my mind. Why would she steal from you? The implication was clear. Who are you for her to take anything from? Who are you to accuse her? Who are you to matter? And that was the moment something inside me cracked clean open. I was done accepting the role they forced on me. I was done being invisible. I was done being their ghost. The day before the engagement party, I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by the printed bank statements, the screenshots, and the folder I had put together with trembling but determined hands. I kept reading through every line again and again, not because I doubted the evidence, but because I knew my parents would. I had learned through an entire lifetime that truth meant nothing unless it served the golden child. But this time, I was prepared. I was tired of being dismissed, tired of being erased, tired of shrinking myself so they could keep worshiping the daughter they had chosen long before either of us understood what favoritism even meant. I knew they would try to twist my words. I knew they would try to shame me into silence. But for the first time in years, I felt a sliver of strength forming beneath my ribs, a quiet voice that whispered not this time. When I walked into the kitchen where both of them sat at the island, they barely looked up. My father read the newspaper with exaggerated focus, the way he always did when he wanted to signal that nothing I said mattered. My mother was scrolling through photos on her phone, likely pictures of my sister in various fittings and makeup trials, each pose perfect, each smile curated. I placed the folder on the granite countertop. My mother finally looked up, her eyes flicking to the folder and then to me, her expression tightening instantly with annoyance, as if my presence alone were an inconvenience. My father sighed hard enough to make a point. "What now?" I pushed the folder toward them. "You need to see this." My voice shook but held firm. My mother opened the folder with the same delicate care she used on holiday decorations, flipping through the documents as if she already knew they would not matter. My father glanced at the first page before leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes sharp with irritation. "This again." His tone cut like ice. I pointed to the banking authorization, the email confirmations, the transactions tied to my sister's name. "She used my account." She opened the card. "She stole $40,000. My mother exhaled impatiently. "Lower your voice. Your sister has been under so much stress planning this engagement. We do not need drama." I felt heat rise in my chest. "This is not drama. This is fraud." My father slammed his palm on the counter so loud I flinched. "Enough. You always find some way to create chaos. Always. My sister stole my money." I forced the words out firm and sharp, refusing to back down. He shot up from his chair, leaning toward me with the same towering anger he had used all my life to shut me down. "If you say one word about this tomorrow, you are out of this family." The threat fell like a stone, heavy and suffocating. My breath caught, but I held my ground. So that was it. That was their solution. Silence me. Protect her. Pretend the theft never happened. My mother stepped in, then her voice soft, pleading, coated in artificial sweetness that made my stomach twist. "Please, do not ruin your sister's day. She deserves to be happy. She deserves everything she has worked for." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Everything she has worked for. She worked for nothing. She stole from me. My mother shut her eyes briefly as if my words were an inconvenience ruining her peace. "Sometimes you have to give a little for family harmony." Harmony, a word they weaponized my whole life. Harmony meant silence. Harmony meant swallowing my pain so they could maintain their perfect image. Harmony meant sacrificing myself for the golden child because that was my assigned purpose. My father's voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl as he leaned closer. "Your sister deserves everything. You do not." The words hit like another slap, one that stung deeper because it was the truth of how he saw me. Not a daughter, not an equal, not even someone worth protecting. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to let my voice crack. I will not stay quiet. For the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not fear, not remorse, but rage at losing control of the daughter he had trained to obey. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away, and for the first time, her mask slipped, revealing a coldness she usually kept tucked beneath soft tones and polite smiles. "If you do this, you will destroy this family." No, I whispered, shaking my head. You destroyed it every time you chose her over the truth. My father pointed toward the staircase. Go. I do not want to look at you. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever if you open your mouth. I walked away, the folder still on the countertop between them. They did not pick it up again. They did not ask questions. They did not care. As I reached the doorway, I paused long enough to look back one final time. My mother was already smoothing her hair, restoring her mask. My father returned to the paper he never actually read. And I realized something with crushing clarity. They were never going to protect me. They were never going to defend me. They were never going to choose me. The warning they gave me was meant to intimidate me into silence. Instead, it carved something fierce and steady inside me. Tomorrow I would speak, no matter what they did, no matter what it cost. When I stepped into the engagement party that night, the warnings my parents had thrown at me echoed faintly in the back of my mind like distant thunder, but they no longer controlled me the way they once had. Their threats felt old, flimsy, worn out from years of being used against me. And as I stood there surrounded by glittering chandeliers and carefully curated perfection, all I could think about was the envelope I had dropped when my father slapped me, the envelope containing the truth they were so desperate to bury. My cheek still burned from the strike, and my scalp still pulsed with the ache from where he had dragged me by my hair. But pain had a strange way of sharpening everything around me instead of dulling it. The humiliation had burned away something soft inside me, leaving behind a steadier, stronger resolve. I wiped the faint smear of blood from my lip, pushed my shoulders back, and lifted my chin as I scanned the room for her. The reason for all of it. My sister stood near the center of a small crowd, her silver dress glimmering under the amber lights as she lifted her hand to show off the engagement ring. My engagement ring. Not literally, but purchased with my money, forged from my savings, from my labor, from the years I had spent working quietly without anyone noticing. The diamond sparkled as she turned her wrist, and guests gasped softly, admiring its size and clarity. She smiled shyly, pretending to be overwhelmed by the generosity of her fiancé, pretending the ring was a symbol of love rather than theft. That smile hardened something inside me. I watched her bask in admiration she had not earned in luxury, bought with money. She stole from me while I stood alone, bruised and unwelcome, the family's designated scapegoat. Something inside me rose, not rage exactly, but a cold determination that washed over the humiliation and pain like a tide erasing footprints. I took a step forward. My heart pounded not with fear, but with the certainty that if I did not speak now, I never would. The pianist shifted into a new melody. The guests laughed softly, the champagne bubbles rose in delicate streams, and my sister continued to glow in her stolen triumph. I reached the edge of the platform just as she lifted her hand again to show another group of guests the ring. The light hit the diamond perfectly, sending a long, thin beam across the marble floor. It felt like the universe was pointing at the truth. Before I could second-guess myself, I took another step forward. She saw me then. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment, just long enough for me to catch it, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. Her eyes flicked to my cheek, still red from our father's slap, then to my hair, still slightly disheveled from being yanked across the floor. Her expression sharpened, the edges turning cold. Do not. Her lips barely moved, but the command was clear. The same command she had given me our entire lives. Be quiet so I can shine. Stay small so I can be adored. And for the first time, I did not obey. I stepped onto the first stair of the platform. The guests nearby noticed me then, and their conversations faded, curious eyes turning toward my approach. I felt dozens of gazes settling on me, but instead of shrinking, I lifted my chin higher. My voice trembled only slightly as I spoke. There is something you all should know. The first words came out softer than I intended, but they carried. Heads turned. Gasps whispered. My sister stiffened, panic flickering across her face before she smoothed it back into a practiced smile. She reached for my wrist nails, digging lightly into my skin as she hissed under her breath. Not here. Not tonight. But the sound around us had already shifted. The pianist slowed, his playing, the guests stopped mid-sentence, and a wave of anticipation rippled through the crowd like everyone sensed a storm brewing. I pulled my wrist away from her grasp. The envelope I had dropped earlier still lay on the floor in the distance, a small white shape against the marble, but I did not need it in my hands. I had memorized every transaction, every date, every charge, every proof of her theft, and I was ready to speak. I opened my mouth to continue, but before I could, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy ones, fast ones. The air tightened, the crowd's energy shifted from curiosity to something sharper. I did not have to turn to know it was my father. A second later, I felt his presence at my back, heat and rage radiating from him as if he had been waiting for me to make this exact move. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging into my skin like claws. I spun slightly, catching the fury in his eyes, the same fury that had chased me through childhood. "How dare you?" His voice was a low snarl. I tried to pull my arm free, but his grip only tightened. "You are not ruining this night. You do not belong here." His words echoed through the ballroom, bouncing off the marble floors and crystal glassware, each one slicing through the thin layer of composure I had carefully stitched over my pain. In that moment, everything slowed, the music fading to a muffled hum as I felt the entire room watching, waiting, holding its breath. I had lived my whole life obeying the unspoken rule that my voice did not matter. Standing here with his fingers crushing my arm and my sister staring at me with icy panic, I finally understood the truth. They silenced me because they feared what would happen if I ever spoke. That realization steadied me. I lifted my head, looked directly into his furious eyes, and for the first time in my life, I did not flinch. I belong wherever the truth does. His face twisted, reddening, and for a moment I thought he might strike me again. But instead, the room erupted into chaos as guests gasped. My sister reached out desperately to stop me, and the storm my family had been avoiding for decades finally began to break open. The moment the room erupted into whispers and shifting bodies, it felt as if the air itself thickened, trapping every sound inside a glass dome where nothing could escape, and everything echoed back sharper than before. My father still gripped my arm, his fingers tightening with the kind of restraint that came not from control, but from the desperation of a man terrified of losing the narrative he had built his entire life around. I could feel his pulse pounding through his palm, erratic and furious, as if my voice alone had the power to shatter everything he valued. But the real weight pressing against me came from the silence spreading through the ballroom, a silence so suffocating it made the memory of the slap almost feel merciful in comparison. It was the silence of people choosing not to see. The silence of people pretending violence was just an uncomfortable moment, not a truth begging to be confronted. The pianist's hands hovered above the keys, frozen mid-motion as he watched us with wide eyes. The servers stood still, their trays tilting slightly as drinks quivered in their glasses. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim as if recoiling from the ugliness spilling into the room. I could feel every pair of eyes on me burning with curiosity, discomfort, judgment, and something else far more painful: indifference. A woman in a burgundy gown pressed a hand to her chest and whispered something to her husband, who shook his head and quietly murmured, "It is not our place." A group of my sister's friends exchanged glances, their glittering makeup catching the light as they shifted uncomfortably, each one waiting for someone else to react so they would not have to. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. No one dared cross the invisible line my mother had drawn earlier with that suffocating sentence, "This is a family matter." I had heard those words so many times growing up that they felt like a cage sliding around me again. I looked at my father, then at the crowd, then at my sister standing on the platform a few feet away. She stood perfectly still. Her fiancé hovered beside her jaw, clenched eyes flicking between her and me as if doing mental calculations. Her expression was icy tight, panicked beneath the surface of her makeup. I noticed the way her fingers curled slightly around her dress, twisting the fabric just enough to betray her fear, not of what I would say, but of what the room might think if I said it. She and my parents had built an entire world on image, a world where she was adored and I was invisible. For the first time, that world trembled. My father's grip tightened again. "You are embarrassing yourself," he hissed through clenched teeth, though we both knew he meant, "You are embarrassing me." The pressure around my arm hurt, but the silence from the room hurt more. A man near the back finally took a hesitant step forward, looking between me and my father as if deciding whether to intervene. His brow furrowed with genuine concern. But before he could say a word, my mother appeared out of the crowd so fast she might have been rehearsing the move. She placed a hand on his chest, gentle but firm, her voice calm and apologetic in the way only practiced manipulation could sound. "Thank you, but please stay out of it. This is a family matter." The man hesitated. For a moment, I saw something shift in his eyes, a flicker of protest. But then he glanced around, saw no one supporting him, and slowly stepped back into the sea of guests. I felt something cold settle inside my chest. I looked toward another cluster of people, two young women whispering urgently to each other. One of them clutched her phone and murmured, "Should we call 911?" My heart jumped for a split second, but her friend grabbed her wrist quickly and shook her head, whispering, "No, do not get involved. It is their business." The phone lowered. The hope vanished. The humiliation tightened like a rope around my throat. I remembered every time I had begged for help as a child and been told to be quiet every time I had cried and been told I was overreacting every time I had asked for fairness and been met with looks of annoyance. And now, in this golden room full of strangers with expensive smiles and polished shoes, I realized nothing had changed. Not really. My sister still stared at me frozen on her pedestal of roses and stolen money, her expression caught between terror and fury. Her eyes pleaded silently, "Stop! Stop now!" But it was too late. The truth was already rising. I took a breath and felt my father's grip tighten again, as if he sensed that breath itself was a threat. And maybe it was. My voice finally broke through the silence, not loud but steady. "You all saw what he did." My father jerked my arm sharply, but I did not stop. I looked at every face around me, each one trying so desperately to pretend this scene was too complicated, too personal, too inconvenient to acknowledge. "You saw him hit me. You saw him drag me. You saw him hurt me. And none of you said a word." The silence thickened heavy with the shame no one wanted to claim. My father leaned in closer, his voice low and venomous as he growled, "You will regret this." But for the first time in my life, I did not feel fear at those words. I felt clarity. I looked around the room one last time, taking in every frozen face, every trembling whisper, every cowardly silence. And in that moment, I realized their indifference was no longer a prison. It was proof. Proof that I had been alone in this family long before I ever spoke a word tonight. Proof that I owed none of them my silence. Proof that I had nothing left to lose. And that truth, more than anything, hurt worse than the slap. When my father finally released his grip on my arm, the sudden absence of pressure sent me stumbling backward, my heel slipping slightly on the polished marble as I struggled to regain my balance. The room was still thick with silence, the kind that grows heavy and stale after violence has been witnessed but not acknowledged, and for a moment I simply stood there suspended between the version of myself they expected me to be and the version I was becoming against their will. My scalp still burned from where he had dragged me earlier, a deep throbbing ache that pulsed with each beat of my heart, and my cheek stung with a hot, sharp reminder of his slap. But it was the coldness in the room, the refusal of anyone to step forward, that left the deepest bruise. I felt the weight of every stare pressing against my skin, but I refused to let it push me down again. Slowly, deliberately, I bent to pick up my purse from the floor near the base of the platform. My hands trembled slightly, whether from pain or anger I could not tell, but I tightened my grip around the strap until it steadied. A faint drop of blood from my lip fell onto the marble, disappearing into the reflection of the chandelier above like it had never existed at all. The music had stopped entirely now, the pianist frozen with his hands over the keys, unsure whether to continue the illusion or let the silence reveal the truth. I straightened breath, catching only slightly as my bruised ribs protested and lifted my chin. My father stood a few feet away, chest-heaving, eyes aflame, but unwilling to make another scene with so many people watching. My mother clung to his arm, her face arranged into a look of dignified concern that masked the panic trembling in her jaw. My sister hovered on her pedestal of roses, her perfect night cracking beneath her feet as she stared at me with wide, horrified eyes. Not horrified at what he had done, horrified at the possibility that I might still speak. The realization hit me with a force stronger than the slap. They were terrified of my voice, terrified of the truth, terrified that the quiet daughter they had spent years silencing might finally step out of the shadows they forced her into. That thought steadied me more than any hand could. I inhaled slowly, tasting the bitterness of champagne still hanging in the air, then turned away from all of them. I began walking toward the exit. One step, another, each one steadier than the last. My heels clicked against the marble, a small, defiant sound that felt louder than any words I could have spoken. A couple near the entrance moved out of my way quickly, their eyes sliding to the floor, as if direct eye contact might pull them into the mess they were desperate to avoid. I kept walking. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was hurt. No one dared acknowledge what had just happened. When I reached the hallway outside the ballroom, the shift in temperature hit me first. The air was cooler here, cleaner, untainted by the thick perfume of forced celebration. The music resumed faintly from behind the closed doors, as if someone inside had finally decided that pretending nothing had happened was easier than facing the truth. My pulse thudded in my throat, but with each breath the fog in my mind began to clear. In the silence of the hallway, away from the suffocating eyes of the guests, the humiliation began to burn away, leaving behind something harder, sharper, and much more dangerous for the people who had spent their lives controlling me. I reached up and touched my cheek gently, wincing at the sting, and felt the slow rise of anger, mixing with an unexpected sense of clarity. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a family that had never wanted me to exist beyond the role they assigned me. Tonight, that role had shattered. The envelope containing the evidence of my sister's theft still lay somewhere on the marble floor inside the ballroom, but the truth did not need paper to breathe anymore. It was alive now. It was unsilenceable. I wiped a small smear of blood from my lips using the back of my hand and let out a long, steady exhale. Enough. I whispered it into the empty hallway, and for the first time, the word did not taste like surrender. It tasted like a beginning. I pulled my phone from my purse, my fingers still shaky but determined, and scrolled through my contacts. I did not call my parents. I did not call my sister. I did not call anyone who might tell me to stay quiet. Instead, I pressed the number for the bank fraud line, lifting the phone to my ear as I stepped farther from the ballroom. My voice was steady when the agent answered. "I want to report identity theft." And when I hung up 15 minutes later, having confirmed the freeze on my account and spoken the truth out loud to someone who finally listened, I felt a small but undeniable shift inside me. A slow surge of power, a reclaiming. Tomorrow I would file a police report. Tomorrow I would not be their scapegoat. But tonight, as I walked out into the cool air outside the venue, I felt the first breath of freedom I had ever tasted. I am reporting everything tonight, and for the first time, the words felt real. The cool night air outside the venue wrapped around me like a shock of clarity sharp enough to steady my pulse, but gentle enough to remind me that the world outside that ballroom still existed, a world where people did not know. My family did not worship my sister and did not excuse violence with the convenient shield of tradition and appearances. I stood beneath the entryway lights, their soft glow spilling onto the pavement, and let myself breathe for a moment. My cheek still throbbed, my scalp still burned, and there was a faint tremble in my fingers, but beneath all of it ran a deeper current I had never felt before, something fierce and sure and rising slowly through every crack their cruelty had carved in me. My phone felt heavy in my hand, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. For the first time, it was not a device that connected me to their demands or expectations. It was my lifeline out of them. I opened the banking app again, staring at the hollowed-out balance that still made my stomach twist. $40,000. Months of work, years of planning, dreams I had quietly nurtured stolen and paraded on my sister's hand in the form of a glittering ring she had no right to wear. My throat tightened, but not with sadness, with anger. Controlled, precise, righteous anger. I navigated to the fraud hotline and pressed call. The automated menu dragged on each button press, feeling like an eternity. But when I finally reached a live representative, my voice surprised me. It was steady, clear, almost calm. "Thank you for calling. My name is Cassandra. How can I help you tonight?" I drew a breath. "I want to report identity theft." The words tumbled out with more force than I expected, as if they had been trapped behind my ribs for months, waiting for this exact moment. There was a pause on the other end, then a shift in the representative's tone, professional but gentle. "I am here to help. Can you tell me what happened?" And so, for the first time, I told the story without interruption. I told her about the unauthorized card, the repeated transactions, the jewelry purchase, the dress, the supplemental charges that added up to a life my sister had purchased with my money. I spoke of the $40,000 of the betrayal of the evidence. I spoke through the shaking in my hands and the bitter taste in my mouth and the fresh sting on my cheek. And she listened, really listened. When I finished, her response was simple but life-altering. "This is identity theft. This is serious." The validation hit me harder than the slap in the ballroom. Someone believed me. Someone who did not know me, did not know my family dynamics, did not know the decades of favoritism and manipulation and emotional erasure. She believed me based on the facts, my truth. She confirmed that the supplemental card would be deactivated immediately, that my account would be frozen to prevent further unauthorized activity, and that the fraud team would review the documentation I uploaded. She told me this was not my fault. That was the moment something cracked in my chest, not painfully, but like the sound of a locked door being forced open from the inside. When the call ended, I lowered the phone slowly. The night around me seemed quieter now, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos still unfolding behind the ballroom doors. I took a breath, then another, letting the reality settle like a new weight in my hands. Reporting the fraud was only the first step. I needed to file a police report. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Waiting had only ever benefited them. So I opened my contacts again and dialed the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher spoke with the same calm professionalism as the bank representative, asking for details, verifying my information, and instructing me to come to the nearest precinct to file the official report. "We can take your initial statement over the phone tonight," she said, "but we will need you in person soon." "Fine," I said. "I will be there." She asked me to describe what happened. I told her everything. The unauthorized card, the transactions, the evidence. She asked who the suspect was. My sister. Saying the words aloud felt like walking across broken glass, but instead of bleeding, I felt lighter. Then her next question cut deeper. "Do you feel safe at home?" I froze for a moment, my eyes drifting back toward the ballroom doors as memory replayed itself in brutal clarity. My father's slap, his hand in my hair, my mother's cold dismissal, the warnings, the threats, the years. I swallowed hard. "No." The dispatcher's tone shifted gently. "Are you in immediate danger?" "Not anymore," I said. "I am not going back inside." She instructed me to stay in a public well-lit area until I could go to the precinct. She reminded me that I had rights, that what happened was not normal, that I was doing the right thing. When the call ended, I exhaled slowly and lowered the phone. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of passing cars. The engagement music resumed faintly behind the closed doors as if nothing outrageous had happened, as if violence could be polished away with enough champagne and smiles. I stood there alone, bruised and shaking, but beneath the pain lived a clarity I had never possessed before. For the first time in my life, someone had listened, someone had believed me, and I had chosen myself over them, I looked up at the sky, the faintest sliver of moon casting a pale glow across the pavement, and whispered the truth that had been clawing its way to the surface for years. This ends now. When I finally reached my car parked 3 blocks away from the venue, my hands were still trembling, but not from fear anymore. It was something sharper than fear, something cleaner, like the slow, steady burn of a fire finally getting the oxygen it had been denied for years. I unlocked the door, slid inside, and for a moment sat in silence, letting the faint hum of the streetlights settle into my bones. The world outside that engagement party felt real in a way my family never had. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat connected to my hotspot and began organizing every screenshot, every PDF, every email thread, every transaction record I had collected over the past month. As the files loaded, a sickening pattern emerged in front of me with brutal clarity, a chronology of theft disguised as entitlement. My sister had not just taken the money, she had built her life with it. Each line item told a story. The first unauthorized charge was 8 months ago, a $79 purchase at a boutique candle store she loved. I remembered thinking at the time that I must have forgotten making the purchase myself, though deep down I knew I never bought luxury candles. Then came a series of small transactions that did not draw attention individually. 20 here, 50 there, 100 for a spa deposit, 200 for a hair appointment. The subtlety was intentional. She was testing the boundaries of my suspicion. Then the theft escalated. The supplemental card she opened without my consent was used to pay for thousands of dollars in bridal spa packages, professional makeup trials, facial treatments, teeth, whitening hair extensions, spray tans, and premium skincare. She was literally polishing herself with my money layering glow on top of glow, while I worked overtime shifts believing I was building my future. Each charge was like a fingerprint of her entitlement. Then came the designer dress. $6,000 for a gown she posted on Instagram with a caption about how blessed she was to be living her dream. I looked at the screenshot of that post, now her smile bright, her eyes sparkling, her ring finger lifted proudly toward the camera. My ring, my money, my future. Then the biggest charge of all, $12,700 for the engagement ring, a diamond solitaire she had bragged about to everyone claiming her fiancé, spared no expense, claiming he wanted the world to know she deserved luxury. But the world did not know the truth. The world did not know she had stolen the future I had been saving for the stability I had been building toward the life I wanted to create without ever asking them for anything. She had carved her dream out of my sacrifice, and my parents had helped her hide it. I opened the Notes app and began documenting everything. Every date, every charge. Every item purchased. My notes formed a timeline. Fraud was not just a pile of numbers. It was a story. A story courts and banks understood. A story that matched legal definitions and consequences no amount of privilege could erase. As I typed, my mind drifted to the moments when she had flaunted her life in front of me without shame. The vacations, the fancy dinners, the weekend trips, the gym membership, the new shoes every month, the luxury skincare. I remembered thinking she must have been drowning in debt or that her fiancé must have been earning far more than he let on. But no, it was me. My bank account funded her curated lifestyle while I stretched groceries and saved coupons and skipped outings to keep my savings intact. My whole body tensed with the realization. She was living the life she wanted and forcing me to live the life she thought I deserved. And my parents allowed it. Enabled it, protected it, because she was the golden child, the chosen one, the princess of perfection whose happiness was everyone's responsibility except her own. I kept typing, noting the date she accessed my banking login. I remembered that night clearly. A sleepover, a glass of wine, a moment when I had left my phone charging in the kitchen while she laughed and said she needed to check the weather for her morning plans. She must have memorized my login. She must have planned this for months, and the more I documented, the more the truth sharpened inside me until it became undeniable. This was not a mistake, not an impulsive decision, not a desperate cry. This was a blueprint, A calculated theft spanning 8 months executed by someone who believed with her entire soul that she was entitled to my life because she believed I was worth less. As I compiled everything, I called the bank back and submitted the evidence. The fraud specialist reviewed it live with me over the phone. Her voice shifted again, growing firmer. This is a pattern of intentional identity theft. You did the right thing contacting us. Then she said something that made my breath catch. And it appears the perpetrator used your information without permission to open a supplemental card, which is a chargeable offense. Perpetrator. Not sister. Not golden child. Not misunderstood angel. Perpetrator. The truth felt like a release. When I hung up, I sat back in my seat, staring at the building blocks of my sister's fantasy crumbling in neat digital folders. Then I called the police again and added the evidence to my report. The officer asked if I had reason to believe the theft would continue. I answered honestly, yes. If I did not stop her, she would never stop. The officer replied, your documentation is extremely thorough. This will support your case. My case. Not theirs, not the family's, mine. As I ended the call, I looked at the mountain of proof sitting on my laptop screen. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. For years, the narrative had been that I was jealous, dramatic, sensitive, difficult, always overreacting, but the numbers did not lie. The bank statements did not lie. The charges did not lie. The screenshots did not lie. My sister had carved her beautiful life out of my bank account, and my parents had carved their loyalty out of my silence. No more. I closed the laptop and held it against my chest, my breaths slowly evening out. Justice does not always arrive with flashing lights and shouting crowds. Sometimes it begins quietly in the front seat of your car at midnight with bruises on your face, blood on your lip, and proof glowing on a screen like a truth finally set free. When the sun rose the next morning, I was still awake, sitting at my kitchen counter with a mug of cold tea I had forgotten to drink and my laptop open to the folder that held everything. Evidence, dates, transactions, screenshots, a blueprint of betrayal. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, then finally forced myself to shower dress and gather my things. I knew what was coming. I just did not know how fast it would explode. By the time I stepped outside, the first text had arrived from my sister's fiancé. It was short, almost painfully polite. Can we talk privately? Something is not adding up. My heart thudded once solid and heavy because I had been waiting for this moment. Not out of vengeance, but out of inevitability. The truth always finds a crack to seep through. I did not respond. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed to work. But the drive was brutally short because before I even reached the first traffic light, my phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls. Then a message from a number I recognized as belonging to my sister's future mother-in-law. Call me. Now. No explanation. No greeting. Just urgency. Desperation had a voice even through text. I pulled into a quiet parking lot and finally answered. The woman's voice came sharp and brittle even before I could say hello. Did you buy the engagement ring? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her words were not accusations yet. They were questions holding the edge of fear. I answered calmly. No, I did not buy it. She inhaled sharply. So she lied. Then it all poured out. The night before, after the party, her son had asked my sister to show him the original receipt for the ring. She said she had thrown it out. He pressed. She snapped. He pushed again. She accused him of not trusting her. He walked out of the room. She followed crying. He demanded answers. She claimed the ring came from a family jeweler. He asked for the name. She said she forgot. He asked again. She started screaming. Her mother-in-law continued, voice trembling with controlled outrage. Something about her story felt wrong. So I checked the jeweler's insurance registry like any responsible parent. The ring was purchased under your legal name, not hers. I closed my eyes, letting the confirmation settle like a stone in a lake. The truth was out. It was only a matter of time now, but she was not done. And the most disturbing thing is when we confronted her, she said you gave her permission to use your money. She said you wanted to help her start her future. My stomach twisted because that was exactly the kind of story my sister would tell. A lie wrapped in just enough sentiment to make her look like the victim. I opened my eyes slowly. I did not give her permission. The line went silent for a long beat, as if the woman on the other end were recalibrating her entire understanding of the person her son was about to marry. Then she spoke again, voice steady with certainty. "I appreciate your honesty, and I am very sorry for what happened to you last night. The fact that the video exists at all is horrifying." My pulse froze. Video. Someone recorded it. I asked carefully. "You saw it." "Yes," she said. "Someone from the catering staff leaked it to another vendor. It is spreading privately." I felt both dizzy and grounded at the same time, like the world had shifted beneath my feet in a way I had been waiting for without realizing it. The truth had not only cracked, it had begun to pour through. I thanked her, hung up, and sat with the weight of everything for several long breaths. The engagement was unraveling thread by thread, and I could picture it clearly. My sister trying to explain away the purchases, my parents scrambling to protect her, their voices rising, their excuses cracking, their story collapsing under its own contradictions. Inside that wealthy suburban bubble they cherished so much, truth had entered like a smoke alarm they could not shut off. By noon, the second wave hit. A cousin called me whispering like she was afraid of being overheard. "Everyone is talking. People are saying your sister stole from you. Your dad is telling everyone you are mentally unstable, but nobody is buying it." The phrase "nobody is buying it" felt like a small healing stitch, like someone tightening a seam that had been ripped open for too long. Then came the final confirmation that the collapse had begun. A message from my sister's fiancé himself. "I need to return the ring. We are postponing everything. Please contact me." For years, people had believed every lie she told because she was charming and sweet and always styled like a perfect little miracle. But fraud does not stay hidden forever. Luxury paid for with stolen money looks different when the light hits it. By evening, the entire extended family knew something was wrong. Not because my parents told them the truth, but because my parents were loudly insisting that nothing was wrong. And in our family, denial was its own confession. That night, lying in bed with ice on my cheek, I realized something with a clarity that tightened my chest. The engagement was not cracking because of me. It was cracking because of what they had done. My silence had never protected them. It had only delayed the fall. The truth was finally louder than their excuses. And for the first time in my life, I was not the one being blamed by everyone. They were beginning to see the rot. They were beginning to see her. They were beginning to see him. They were beginning to see the family I had endured. The collapse had started, and there was no going back. The knock on my apartment door came long before sunset, sharp enough to slice through the thin quiet I had managed to build around myself since leaving the police station, a quiet made of exhaustion, bruises, paperwork, and the faint buzzing of my phone as messages from people I barely spoke to poured in like floodwater. I froze mid-step, a stack of printed bank statements in my hands because I already knew who it was. There was a specific violence in the way they knocked, a kind of pounding that did not ask for permission so much as declare ownership. I set the papers down, slowly inhaled, and approached the door, my heart thudding not with fear, but with something colder, something steadier, something close to resignation. When I looked through the peephole, my pulse did not spike. Of course it was them. My parents stood on the other side, my mother wringing her hands dramatically, my father's jaw locked so tight the muscles in his neck bulged. His face still held the same shade of outrage he wore last night when he dragged me by my hair, but now it had curdled into something uglier, something desperate. I opened the door only halfway, just enough to block them from pushing in. My father tried anyway. He shoved his shoulder against the door as if he still had the right to bulldoze through the boundaries he had never respected. I held firm and stared at him through the narrow gap. "What do you want?" My voice was flat cold, strangely calm, considering the bruises still throbbing under my skin. My father exploded immediately. "What did you tell them?" His voice boomed down the hallway, rattling the frame. "What did you tell the bank? What did you tell the police?" My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling theatrically. You are destroying your sister's life." She sobbed like someone auditioning for a tragic role. "You are tearing this family apart." I blinked slowly because the words were so familiar, so predictable, they almost tasted stale. My father leaned forward, face inches from mine. "If your sister's engagement falls apart, it's on you. You understand that. Not on her. Not on us. On you." He jabbed a finger against the narrow opening of the door. I could smell the bitterness of last night's whiskey still hanging on him. "My sister stole $40,000 from me," I said evenly. "You want to talk about blame." My mother gasped like I had slapped her. "Lower your voice. Someone might hear." That was always her fear. Not violence, not theft, not cruelty. Image. Neighbors gossiping was a crisis. Her daughter being dragged across marble in public was a misstep. My father slammed his palm against the door so hard it rattled against its hinges. "You ungrateful little girl! How dare you air family business to outsiders?" Family business. That phrase hit me the way his slap had. For years, those words had been used like duct tape slapped across my mouth. Family business meant silence. Family business meant loyalty to the abuser. Family business meant endure it quietly. Family business meant never embarrass the people who hurt you. I stood a little straighter. "She committed fraud. I filed a police report." "That's not family business. That's a crime." My father's face darkened a shade I had not seen since childhood. The shade that preceded blows, the shade that signaled danger. He shoved his hand through the gap in the door, reaching for me, grabbing blindly like he was absolutely entitled to my body, my space, my compliance. "Let me in," he barked. "We are going to fix this tonight." I pushed the door harder, wedging my foot behind it for leverage. "You are not coming in." My mother surged forward, crying harder. "Please, please just open the door. You do not understand what you have done. People are calling us non-stop. Your sister is devastated. She will lose everything." Something inside me snapped at that word. Everything. Everything. My sister had stolen tens of thousands from me, lived her dream life with my money, worn my future on her finger, and yet they were sobbing over the idea that she might lose the fantasy built on theft. My father snarled, "You have always been jealous of her. Always." I steadied my breath. Always was the word they leaned on when they wanted to rewrite history. They used it like it erased facts. I put my hand on the door and stared at them both. "You want the truth." My voice was quiet, almost gentle, because I needed them to hear every word. "You ruined my life long before she stole from me. You made sure I knew I was unwanted. You made sure she knew she could take whatever she wanted." My mother froze mid-sob. My father's jaw slackened for the first time since he arrived. I kept going. "All those years you called me dramatic. All those years you dismissed me. All those years you protected her no matter what she did." I swallowed hard. "I am done." My father shoved the door again harder. "You idiot. You think the police will believe you. You think this will actually stick. We will fix this before it gets out. You will tell them you made a mistake. You will go down to the station and retract your statement." I almost laughed. "You think I called just the police?" There was the slightest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The first hint of fear. "You what?" His voice cracked. "I reported the fraud to the bank last night. They froze the account. I contacted the Financial Crimes Unit. I filed a digital affidavit. They have everything, every screenshot, every charge, every unauthorized login, every bank statement, everything." My mother pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh, God, you did this. You destroyed us." I leaned in, gaze steady. "No. You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped covering for you." My father exhaled sharply, a sound between rage and panic, then stepped back. For a brief second, he looked almost small, almost human. Then he pointed at me, his voice low and venomous. "You will regret this. You are no daughter of mine." I felt the words hit, but not deeply. Not like they once would have, because I finally understood something so clearly it made my chest expand with relief. I had never really been their daughter, not in the way daughters deserved. My mother whispered through tears, We lost everything because of you. I closed my eyes for a brief calm moment and then opened them. No, you lost control. That is all. My father's nostrils flared, my mother sobbed again, and I pushed the door until it clicked shut in their faces. For a long moment, I stood with my forehead against the wood, listening to their muffled voices rise and fall, a symphony of blame and fear and collapsing illusions. Then their footsteps retreated down the hall, still arguing, still panicking, still searching for someone to blame, now that their scapegoat refused to kneel. When silence finally reclaimed the space around me, I let out a long, steady breath. My hands were shaking, but the rest of me felt terrifyingly calm. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them without apology. For the first time, I had refused to let them twist the narrative. For the first time, I had heard my own voice louder than theirs, and it was enough. The first sign that something had shifted came the next morning when I woke to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand, rattling against the wood like it was trying to warn me. At first, I ignored it, rolling onto my back, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet wash over me like a blanket after the storm from the night before. My cheek still ached, my scalp still felt tender where he had dragged me, and the events of the engagement felt half nightmare, half memory. The kind of thing that happened to someone else in a movie, not to me in real life. But the buzzing would not stop. Message after message, calls, notifications stacking like falling dominoes. When I finally reached for the phone, the screen lit up with so many alerts that for a moment I could not even see the background image. 57 missed calls, dozens of texts, group chats I had never spoken in before exploding with activity. And then I saw it, a link sent by a coworker I had barely talked to, then another from a former classmate, then another from a neighbor who barely remembered my name. All the links had the same caption, "Is this you?" My blood ran cold. I clicked one, and the video opened. It took only 1 second of footage for my breath to stop in my chest. There I was, in the ballroom. In the dress I had spent hours picking out, now torn and stained. My father towered over me, face twisted with fury. Then the slap. The sound cracked loud even through the phone speakers. Guests froze. Someone gasped. Then he grabbed me by the hair and dragged me across the marble floor. My head jerked back unnaturally, my heels scraping the ground, my body limp from shock as he yanked me like I was an object instead of a person. The room was silent in the video, but the camera mic caught everything. My sister, watching from the stage, smirking. My mother stepping in front of someone who tried to help, whispering sharply, "This is a family matter." Then my father hauling me toward the exit. The video cut off right before he threw me outside. I stared at the screen, my hand covering my mouth without realizing it. I had lived the moment. I had survived the moment. But seeing it from the outside made it feel like a stranger's agony, a brutality so stark it almost did not look real. That server recorded it. The one who had pulled out his phone quietly. He must have uploaded it after his shift. I checked the original source. Posted anonymously. Captioned only with millionaire father drags daughter by her hair at engagement party. No names, no locations, no context. But the internet did not need context. It needed outrage. And outrage it had. 200,000 views. Then 400,000. Then 800,000. Comments piled beneath the video like debris after a storm. Arrest him. This is abuse. Why did no one stop him? The mother blocking people is sickening. That bride smiling, disgusting. The internet was vicious, but for once not toward me. Then the next blow landed. The video hit TikTok, and TikTok did what TikTok always does. It spread like wildfire. Millions of views now, people stitching it, lawyers analyzing it, domestic violence advocates breaking it down. Someone slowed it to show the exact moment my father twisted my hair. Someone else zoomed in on my sister saying, "Only a monster smiles like that." Someone recognized the venue. Comment sections tipped off local reporters. Panic should have set in. Shame should have flooded me. But all I felt was a strange grounding stillness. The world was finally seeing them. Not me. Them. Then came the notification that made my heart jolt. A message from an unknown number. "This is Officer Ramirez with the local police department. We have seen the video. Please call when you can." My chest tightened. They had contacted me before, but the video changed everything. I called back immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Thank you for returning my call. I assume you know why I reached out." "Yes," I whispered. "We would like you to come in today if possible. The video provides clear evidence of domestic assault. We will be adding it to your report." My head dipped forward, my hand covering my eyes as a trembling breath left me. It was happening. For once, justice did not feel like an impossible fantasy. When I hung up, another message came through. This one from a number I never wanted to see again. "My sister. Delete that video now." I let out a bitter laugh, as if I had that kind of power, as if the world would unsee what had been broadcast to millions. Then another message. "You are literally ruining my life." I typed a reply. "You ruined your own life when you stole from me." She responded instantly. "No one needs to know that. Just fix it." My hands trembled as I typed back. "I am not fixing anything." The typing bubbles appeared, then vanished, appeared again, then disappeared. She had no script for this, no way to twist it, no lie to hide behind. Not anymore. Then my mother called, then my father. I declined both. I showered, dressed, pulled my hair back, gently wincing when my fingers brushed the tender spot on my scalp. As I locked my apartment door behind me, a neighbor stepped out of her unit, eyes wide with recognition. "Is everything okay? Do you need anything?" The kindness pierced something fragile inside me. I nodded, swallowing a wave of emotion. "Thank you, I am fine." But for the first time, I did not say it to hide. I said it because it was becoming true. When I arrived at the police station, the officer greeted me with a sympathetic nod. "We have the video. It supports your claims completely." They asked me to confirm details, time, location, intent. I answered calmly. No trembling, no uncertainty. Evidence sat beside me in a folder. Evidence existed online for the world to see. Evidence had replaced every denial my family ever weaponized against me. When the interview ended, the officer closed the file with a decisive sound. "We are moving forward." That simple sentence felt like oxygen filling my lungs for the first time in years. As I walked out of the station, sunlight warmed my bruised cheek, a strange, comforting heat against a place that had only known pain the night before. And for the first time in my life, I realized something profound. The video did not ruin my family. My family ruined themselves. The video simply showed the truth, and truth once seen cannot be dragged back into the dark. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold air, the kind that sat heavy in the lungs, as if reminding everyone who walked through its doors that truth weighed something. I clutched the folder of evidence against my chest, feeling the sharp corners dig into my palms, grounding me in reality. My lawyer walked beside me, calm and steady, the exact opposite of the chaos my family had tried to drown me in the past few days. Reporters stood outside the entrance, their cameras trained on the revolving door as though waiting for a ghost to step through. But I was not a ghost, not anymore. Inside, the courtroom was already half filled. My sister sat at the front with her attorney, her hands clasped tightly together. Her face streaked with mascara as if she had spent all morning crying in hopes of catching sympathy. My mother sat behind her eyes, swollen, posture rigid, glancing around with the frantic twitch of someone desperately evaluating who might be watching. My father was escorted in moments later, guarded on both sides by deputies. Seeing him in cuffs sent a ripple through me, not satisfaction exactly, but something deeper. Recognition, consequence, given shape. He spotted me as he was led to his seat, his eyes narrowing with the same fury he had worn when his hand met my cheek. But behind the rage, there was something else too. A flicker, something close to fear. I sat down quietly, my lawyer placing a reassuring hand on my arm before the judge walked in. All rise. The bailiff's voice echoed and everyone stood. The judge took her place, her expression stern, but not unkind. When she scanned the room, her gaze lingered on the bruises still faintly marking my cheek and the healing redness along my hairline. Then everything began. The prosecutor laid out the sequence of events, calmly beginning, not with the slap, not with the assault, but with the fraud. The bank records appeared on the overhead screen one by one. Transactions, dates, times, card numbers, password resets. My sister stared at the glowing evidence as though seeing it for the first time, as though the theft she had committed was somehow an administrative inconvenience instead of a deliberate violation. Her lawyer argued that it was all a misunderstanding, that she had permission to use my account, that she believed she was helping me manage my finances. The prosecutor paused, then clicked the remote, bringing up the receipt for the $12,000 ring. Signed in my name. The courtroom murmured. My sister's attorney blanched. No one manages finances by buying themselves engagement rings, the prosecutor said. The judge nodded slowly. Then it shifted. The prosecutor introduced the video. My heart hammered once a deep, hollow thud, because even though I had watched it online, hearing it echo through a courtroom filled with strangers was something else entirely. Something raw. Something punishing. The screen lit up with the ballroom, the music, the dresses, the glow, then the slap. Gasps erupted across the room. Even the judge's expression tightened just slightly, but enough to acknowledge the brutality of the footage. Then the dragging, my body sliding across the marble, my father's hand yanked into my hair, my sister smirking, my mother blocking help. The silence in the courtroom thickened not with disbelief, but with collective disgust. When the video ended, no one moved. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, do you deny that this is you in the video? My father lifted his chin. That was taken out of context. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. What context justifies physical assault? My father swallowed his bravado, cracking. I was disciplining her. She was hysterical. The judge's eyes hardened. Disciplining an adult by dragging her by her hair across a ballroom floor. My father's jaw flexed. My mother suddenly stood, her voice cracking. He did not mean it. She provoked him. There was a collective inhale. The judge lifted a hand sharply. Sit down, and the tone of it snapped through the room like a whip. My mother sat. My sister shrank. My father's shoulders faltered. The prosecutor turned to me. Miss Carter, please take the stand. I walked slowly, every step heavy but deliberate. When I sat, the courtroom blurred at the edges for a moment, but my voice did not shake when the questioning began. I told them everything. The fraud, the threats, the childhood favoritism, the party, the slap, the dragging, my attempts to get help, my mother blocking interference, my sister watching. The judge listened, expression unreadable, but her eyes softened briefly when I described the moment my father's hand tangled in my hair. The prosecutor presented the restraining order request next, and the judge reviewed the photographs of my injuries. Then she spoke. Mr. Carter, please stand. My father rose slowly. This court finds probable cause to move forward with charges of domestic assault, battery, and reckless endangerment. He inhaled sharply. My mother cried out. The judge continued. A temporary restraining order is granted effective immediately. Your daughter is not to be contacted under any circumstances. My father opened his mouth to protest, but the judge raised her voice. Sit. Then she turned to my sister. Miss Carter, regarding the financial allegations. The judge reviewed the document, silently flipping through pages of purchases, signatures, and screenshots. Finally, she looked up. This is fraud. You will repay the full amount. And based on evidence provided, this will be entered into your permanent record. My sister burst into tears, shoulders shaking violently. The judge's voice remained firm. Actions have consequences. The courtroom fell silent again. Then the judge added almost gently, engagements built on lies often collapse under truth. And with that, the hearing ended. Deputies escorted my father out, cameras flashing outside in harsh staccato bursts. My sister remained frozen in her seat. Her perfect life crumbled at her feet. My mother stared at me with devastation so intense it should have wounded me, but it did not, because I finally understood what that devastation really meant. They were not mourning what they had done to me. They were mourning their reputation. The truth had won, and it was only the beginning. The fallout began before I even reached the steps of the courthouse. As I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped into the sunlight, my phone vibrated again and again, buzzing so violently it felt like it was trying to leap out of my hand. I ignored it at first, walking slowly down the stone steps while reporters shouted questions that blurred into white noise. I kept my eyes forward, one foot in front of the other, my breath steady, my ribs rising and falling in a rhythm that felt foreign and strangely peaceful. Then a notification flashed across my lock screen, bright and unmistakable. The engagement has been officially called off. I stopped mid-step, blinking at the words, reading them again to make sure I had not imagined them. My sister's perfect future, the one built on my money, my silence, my suffering, had finally cracked under the weight of truth. And it was not because of me. It was because of her, because of what she did, because of what they allowed. I continued walking, letting the sunlight warm the bruised cheek that still throbbed beneath the surface. When I reached my car, I finally unlocked my phone. Everything had exploded, and not in a quiet way. My sister's fiancé had gone public. He had posted a statement online, one painfully polite sentence at a time, explaining that he was ending the engagement due to unresolved financial concerns and recent revelations that had shaken the foundation of trust. He did not mention my name. He did not need to. The comment section did the rest. People connected the ring receipt, the video, the timeline, the lies. Someone had found my sister's Instagram post flaunting the ring. Someone else found the exact date it was purchased. Someone matched it to the bank statement screenshot circulating online. And suddenly, a narrative formed without any help from me. A narrative built by observers who had no loyalty to my family. A narrative built on facts. Beneath the fiancé's statement, thousands of comments poured in. She stole from her own sister. That family is toxic. The mother blocking people from helping unbelievable. The father needs to be in prison. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From release. Then came the second wave. Extended family group chats ignited like fireworks. Screenshots of the leaked video spread through cousins, aunts, and uncles who had once praised my father at every Thanksgiving table. Their messages came through in bursts. Is this real? Tell us this is edited. Why would he do that? How long has this been happening? But there were no questions about my sister's theft, because deep down they already knew she was capable of lies. They had just never thought those lies would matter. Until now. My cousin Rachel called me. I hesitated but answered. Her voice burst through the line in a frantic whisper. Your parents are going crazy. They are telling everyone you framed your sister. That you doctored the bank records. That you leaked the video. I let out a slow breath. I leaked nothing. I did not even know the server recorded it. Rachel paused, then said quietly, People believe you, not them. And that was the earthquake. That was the shift they never saw coming. My entire life they had relied on control, on narrative, on appearance, on polished illusions. But the internet was a battlefield they could not manipulate, and they were losing. By afternoon, my father's business partners had released a statement distancing themselves from him. The country club revoked his membership. A charity board he sat on announced an emergency review of his position. My mother, ever theatrical, posted a vague message on Facebook claiming her family was under attack by hateful strangers who did not understand the situation. People in the comments immediately asked about the video. She deleted the post within minutes. Then, she texted me, You need to fix this, please. I stared at the message, fix this, as if I had broken something, as if what happened had not originated with her husband's violence and her daughter's fraud. As if I had not been dragged by my hair in front of 100 people while she stood guard at the edge of the crowd prioritizing image over my pain. I did not respond. My father tried next, a single voicemail, heavy breathing, a tone I had never heard from him, a tone that was not anger, not dominance, something more fragile, something like a drowning man grasping for the final rope. "You ruined us." His voice broke on the last word, but not from remorse. It was the sound of a man watching his own reflection crack and realizing there was no way to glue it back together. I deleted the voicemail without listening again. By early evening, another shock arrived. My sister's fiancé's parents released a statement accusing my sister of financial dishonesty and expressing support for victims of domestic violence. Not my family. Victims of domestic violence. They had seen the video. They had seen the truth. And they were not protecting the abusers. My sister went silent online, her accounts locked, her engagement photos erased, but screenshots lived forever. When I opened my messaging app again, I found a message from an unknown number. It was her. "You ruined everything I had." My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed back. "You ruined everything I earned." No bubbles appeared after that. Nothing. The silence tasted like closure. Late that night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of hot tea, the aroma filling my small apartment with something warm and steady. I scrolled through the chaos that had unfolded in the past 12 hours. People I did not know defending me, advocates calling for justice, strangers expressing outrage. And in every one of those reactions, I found something unexpected. Validation. The world believed me. For the first time, not because I screamed louder, not because I begged, but because the truth had finally been given space to breathe. My father's image was shattered. My mother's performance was exposed. My sister's lies were documented. And I did not feel guilt. I did not feel shame. I felt free, not because they were suffering, but because their suffering was no longer mine to carry. What they lost were illusions. What I gained was reality. And reality, for the first time in my life, felt like hope. I moved to the coast 3 weeks after the court hearing, packing my life into 4 cardboard boxes and the back seat of my aging Honda, leaving behind the apartment where I had cried, healed, shaken, and risen. The drive toward the ocean felt like shedding layers of skin I had worn for too long. Layers made of fear and obligation and the silent pressure of being the family scapegoat. With every mile, the city skyline shrank in the rearview mirror until it became nothing more than a smudge against the sky, fading like a bruise that no longer hurt. When I arrived in the small seaside town, the first thing I noticed was the air. It tasted different, cleaner, saltier, honest. The crash of waves against the shore hummed through my bones in a way that soothed places inside me I had never known how to calm. I rented a tiny cottage near the water, the kind with peeling white shutters and a blue door that reminded me of childhood paint boxes. The porch creaked in a comforting way like a tired but welcoming friend. For the first few days, I simply breathed. I let myself exist without expectation. I walked along the beach at sunrise, the cold sand pressing against my feet, the ocean stretching out like the first chapter of a story that finally belonged to me. No one knew my name here. No one knew the video. No one knew the bruises or the court hearings or the decades of being told I was the problem. I was simply a woman starting over. One morning, while sipping coffee outside, an older neighbor with silver hair and a sweater 2 sizes too big wandered by with her dog. She smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried no curiosity, no judgment, just genuine welcome. "You must be new here," she said. The dog sniffed my ankle as if offering its own greeting. I nodded. "Just moved in." "Well," she said, "this is a good place to start again. People who come here usually need the ocean more than they need anything else." I felt something warm stir in my chest. Maybe she was right. Therapy sessions began a week later in a little office overlooking the harbor. My therapist had kind eyes and a soft voice that never rushed me. The first session, I barely knew where to begin. There was too much, too many years. Too many wounds layered atop one another like sediment. But she listened. She didn't question my memories. She didn't tell me to forgive. She didn't make excuses for my parents or my sister. She simply said, "You survived long-term emotional neglect and physical abuse. That leaves scars that deserve care." When she said the word deserve, something inside me cracked, not painfully, but like ice melting under warmth. Week by week, I learned to untangle the knots inside me, the ones formed by years of gaslighting and guilt. I learned that I had been conditioned to believe my needs were burdens, my feelings, inconveniences, my boundaries, disobedience. I learned that my family's version of love had never been love at all. On my days off, I found a barista job at a small cafe by the pier, a quiet place with wooden tables and hand-painted mugs. The owner, a gentleman in his 60s, hired me without fuss. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't probe into my reasons for moving. He simply said, "Everyone deserves a fresh start." The work was simple and peaceful: pouring coffee, taking orders, sweeping floors that smelled faintly of cinnamon and the sea. There were moments of quiet so soft they felt like medicine. Sometimes I would watch the tide roll in through the front window, the horizon shifting colors like a slow heartbeat. On weekends, local artists displayed their work along the boardwalk. One afternoon, I stopped at a booth where a woman painted watercolor seascapes, the blues and grays of her waves swirling together in gentle motion. She glanced at me, her eyes studying my face. "You have a story in you," she said. "A heavy one. But you're carrying it well." I didn't know how to respond at first. Then I simply nodded. "I'm learning how." She smiled. "Good. The ocean teaches us how to let go without forgetting." As the weeks passed, something unfamiliar bloomed inside me. Stability, quiet, safety. At night, I cooked simple meals, sat on my porch with a blanket, and listened to the waves crash against the rocks. Some nights I cried. Not from pain, but from release. Healing is strange that way. It hurts even as it frees you. I checked on the legal proceedings occasionally, but less and less as time went on. My father's sentencing date was set. My sister's repayment plan was in progress. My mother continued sending long, dramatic emails I never opened. Their lives had become storms I no longer lived inside. I was not running from them anymore. I was simply removing myself from a house that had been collapsing for decades. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of pink and gold, I whispered a truth I had never been able to say aloud. "I choose me now," and the ocean carried the words away, scattering them across the waves like seeds ready to grow. I did not plan to share my story publicly. For weeks after moving to the ocean, I lived quietly, speaking only to my therapist, my coworkers, and the neighbor who walked her dog past my porch each morning. I let the waves do their work, carving out the hurt in slow, steady motions, the way the tide softens jagged stones. I washed dishes in the little cafe, poured coffee with the easy rhythm of someone relearning how to breathe, and let my mind rest for the first time in years. But trauma is a strange thing. It settles into the corners of your body like dust. You learn to live with it until you don't. Until one day you wake up and realize that the weight you carry is no longer made of memory, but of silence. And silence, I had learned the hard way, protects the wrong people. One evening, as I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cool ocean wind, I opened my laptop and stared at a blank document. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the waves roll in and out, debating whether speaking would reopen wounds that had only just begun to scab. But then I remembered the girl on the ballroom floor, the one who had been slapped in front of strangers, the one dragged by her hair while her mother blocked help and her sister watched with a smile, the one who had been conditioned to believe she should take it, endure it, stay quiet to keep the peace. That girl deserved to be heard. And so I began typing, not for revenge, not for sympathy, but because I wanted people to know the truth. Not just my truth, but the truth of so many who survive families where love is conditional and loyalty is demanded at the price of your dignity. I wrote about the years of favoritism, the emotional neglect, the way my father dismissed me, the way my mother scolded me for every tear, the way my sister had grown comfortable taking whatever she wanted. I wrote about the stolen money, the fraud, the laughter, the bruises, the humiliation. I wrote about the moment in the ballroom when I realized I could either stay silent or save myself. And when I finished, I added something I had never said out loud. I am not ashamed anymore. I thought that would be the end of it, but the story resonated. It spread. It reached inboxes and message boards and support groups and community pages. People wrote back, thousands of them. Men, women, teenagers, grandparents, strangers who had lived their own version of my story. A woman in her 70s who had been estranged from her violent father for 50 years. A man whose mother chose his abusive brother over him until the day he moved out. A young girl who had been told she was jealous of her sister when she tried to speak about stolen money. A grandmother who had raised her grandkids because her daughter repeated the same toxic patterns she had once endured. Their stories poured into my inbox like waves, relentless and honest, each one echoing the same broken truth. Families can wound you in ways strangers never could, and leaving does not make you ungrateful. It makes you brave. I read every message, some through tears, some through deep breaths that felt like they stretched old scars inside me. And somewhere between the third and the 300th reply, I realized something that stunned me. I was not alone. I had never been alone. There were thousands of us, millions maybe. People who had grown up as the scapegoat, the forgotten child, the quiet one, the one blamed, dismissed, laughed at, shoved aside. People who had chosen survival at the cost of belonging. People who had to rebuild their identity from the rubble of someone else's cruelty. And so I wrote again, this time directly to them. And now to you. If you are watching this, listening to this, reading this, and some part of my story sounds like yours, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not imagining the hurt. You are not wrong for wanting respect. You are not dramatic for asking for basic decency. You are not ungrateful for walking away. You are not broken for needing healing, and you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep anyone warm, especially not the people who watched you burn. Maybe you are the daughter who was always compared, the son who was always blamed, the sibling who was always expected to sacrifice. Maybe you were told to tolerate what hurt you because that is how family is. Maybe you experienced the kind of love that only pretended to be love when other people were watching. Maybe someone convinced you your pain was an inconvenience. But here is the truth I had to learn the hardest way possible. Family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by behavior, by safety, by love that does not bruise, by support that does not silence, by presence that does not feel like walking on broken glass. And if you have never had that kind of family, you can build one. You can grow one. You can choose one. I did. In the kindness of strangers who reached out, in the quiet strength of people who survived the same wounds, in the calm voice of my therapist, in the neighbor whose dog nuzzled my hand, in the barista who told me to take my time learning the register, in the artist who saw the weight behind my eyes and still smiled. Family is not always who you come from. Sometimes it is who you find along the way, and sometimes it is who finds you. Healing is not linear. Some days you will feel free. Other days, the past will tap you on the shoulder when you least expect it. Some mornings you will wake up feeling strong. Others you will feel the old ache pulling you back. But keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep choosing the life that does not ask you to shrink to be loved. One evening recently, I sat on the beach watching the waves break in soft folds against the sand. The sky glowed lavender and gold. Couples walked by holding hands. Children built crooked sand castles. And I whispered something into the wind. I survived, and I want you to survive too. So if you are watching this from your living room, from your bedroom, from your car parked outside a home that does not feel safe, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city, your state, your story. Tell me if you have ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you. Tell me if you found freedom on the other side. I read every comment, every message, every voice that rises from the ache toward the light. Your story matters. You matter, and you are not alone.